Hello and welcome to another edition of the Geeks Podcast. With me here today is Josie.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. Nice to have you.
Josie, today we're going to be talking about the significance of companies giving back to their communities. In recent years, we've been seeing a lot of companies and corporations addressing the social issues through philanthropic activities. So today we want to explore the why, the how, the what of these initiatives, and why is it so important for companies to have these social missions?
If you ask me, it's being dictated by the market. I do think that the social fabric of our demographics is changing, and the consumer or the buyers are demanding that from organizations, from governments, from public agencies. Yeah. So I think it's being driven by the consumer market.
Yeah, I think it's there's definitely a lot of need in the community, and I think when we're talking about all these companies giving back, especially tech companies, and the reason for it is mainly because every company has a mission, and I think it's important for companies to align their company mission with the social mission. Because at the end of the day, companies made out of people. People come from communities, and if these communities are not healthy, companies at the end of the day, they're not healthy either. So from a business perspective, it makes total sense as far as employee engagement, cultural alignment, to have like a purpose-driven, a social-driven mission in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with some type of a selfish need where the consumer is asking for it, companies do it, they get success from it, and then it gets replicated.
It's also a great talent attraction tool. A lot of people want to work for a company that gives back, that has an impact on their communities and on society in general. So I think it's a great retention and attraction tool.
I think that's a great byproduct. But again, I feel like the main reason why companies do it and organizations and public is because the consumers or the public are demanding it.
So moving from the why it needs to be done to the how, a lot of companies, they have a mission, and then they want to align it with a social good. How can they go about identifying the community need that aligns with their business needs?
Yeah. So I think it all begins with consumers dictating it, right? And then, but the longevity of it, the effectiveness of it, really depends on the strategies and the tactics for implementation, right? So as you mentioned, how do you even go about doing it? How do you successfully continue to do it? And how do you optimize those efforts, right? I think it starts with business alignment, because let's say you're an organization that was literally born from a social good perspective. So for example, Bob's, basically since they started, they said for every pair of shoe that we sell, we're going to donate. Or some of these other kind of organizations that like buy a sock and we donate a sock or something like that. They started with it, right? So it's not just an alignment. It is like at the core of their business, right? But then you have organizations that maybe started as a bank, right? And now have to drive social initiatives. How do you make any type of initiative successful? I think it all starts with alignment. So if it's not part of your core business and it's something that you're implementing because it's good for business, it's a good look, it's good for branding, and a byproduct of that could be great retention. I think the key indicator is alignment. It needs to align with your business needs and what you're trying to deliver to the community. And I think in alignment, it also creates a certain level of genuineness where it's like you're actually contributing to something that you don't only are just on the surface agree with, but that you also wholeheartedly embrace, right?
Also, it's important to be present, to have boots on the ground. You cannot detect a need as a corporation if you're completely detached from the reality of your community. So it's very important to kind of be out there, be in the street, reach out to organizations, to communities, to schools, understand what your local communities need that you can contribute to within your business line. And that's probably why we see a lot of tech companies giving back, because pretty much tech can go anywhere, right? You can easily identify people's needs and build at least a system for them, or a website, or a Facebook page. But that actually applies to every single organization out there. If you find, as a business, if you try to find organizations that could use your services, or that you could bring your expertise or your know-how or your people's expertise into helping them do better, whether it's the shelter down the street or the senior center, there's always opportunity to detect a need if you're actually there and engaged within your communities. I think that's an important piece that a lot of companies ignore.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on how you define doing good, right? So you can define good by giving back, maybe through service, giving back through sponsorships, giving back through some type of financial initiatives. It can also just be sustainability, like giving back by maybe using a fleet of electric vehicles versus gas-powered vehicles, right? By maybe having your procurement department have a diverse supplier program, for example. You're making your supply chain more diverse and also more sustainable, right? And you're also helping those smaller businesses that might not be able to compete, right? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways of doing good, and sometimes it's just giving stuff away, like what you just mentioned, which is giving away services, giving away money, right? Or it's just making less impact on like green initiatives. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, right?
So talking about the need of the community, I think one of the ways that a lot of companies give back, and I know this topic is close to your heart, is through education-based initiatives, reskilling-based initiatives. Why is that important to you? Why are you so passionate about education?
Oh my God, we don't have an hour, Kareem, to talk about this. But for anybody who knows me, I'm a numbers gal. I absolutely love statistics. I love looking at demographics and understanding talent and understanding where the disparity of that talent is. And I also care deeply about the world and the people that live in it. And just throughout my life and research, I know how many people we have in the world, and I know the economic disparity between certain geographic locations and other geographic locations. I also know the need that businesses and communities have, and there's a big gap. There's a gap between able-bodied, smart individuals that can deliver the needs of the business and organizations and public agencies and all of that, and where they're located and whether they have the capabilities to fulfill these needs. So I feel like as a society in general, we can optimize our talent by reskilling them and, finding these resources that are able-bodied, that are smart, that have high IQs, that maybe just didn't have the same access to education because of their geolocation, because of their socioeconomic status, because of their ethnicity, whatever it is, right? But you have able-bodied resources that are ready and willing to work and want to work, and you have businesses and organizations that need somebody to fill that. So I feel like reskilling and upskilling initiatives bridge that gap and give opportunity.
That's true. I mean, just again, being around as a business, you always see there's some professions that are lacking talent in general, like not only IT, but let's just say the construction industry, the mechanics, like anything that has to do with mechanics, like I don't know, like dealerships or heavy equipment. Nursing is
Education.
big, like nursing, and then yet there's all these talent that come out of high school or that that have all this potential to go into these very high paying available jobs. They lack orientation, and I believe a lot of that comes from the current education system is not so in touch with the business world. I remember back in college, we'd take classes in C++ or in great languages in computer science that are very, very basic to understanding the concepts, which are great. And then you go get a job, and then you're asked to develop in Java, where you did everything in C++, or you're asked to develop in C Sharp. And it's important for education, the establishment, to teach the basics and concepts, but also have a little bit of hands-on of what's going on, what the labor market needs. So I feel like the responsibility is mutual. It's not up to just schools to go out and ask businesses what you need. It's also up to the businesses to actually be involved in their local chamber of commerce, through their local school district, through their local, and say, okay, this is how we can help, right? We can, if I am, and people that have already had a previous career that want to change, or their career got, we talked about AI, but like the 50-year-old AI, which is robotics and automation that happened a long time ago. So there's a lot of jobs, a lot of people that are very skilled, very smart, just need an opportunity to learn something else and be excellent at it.
Yeah, so this is what I meant by the longevity of the programs really depends on the alignment that it has with the core business and whether they genuinely care about what it is that they're trying to do, right? So, for example, if you are in the nursing space or in the medical space and you know that there's a lack of nursing and you're going to go out and you're going to maybe give a scholarship for nursing so that becomes more available. Number one, you're identifying a need, right, that you're aligned with, because if you get more nurses then into the industry, then hopefully you will benefit from that increase in talent, right? But also they're causing a social good. So, yeah, I think to kind of playing the devil's advocate, the world is moving fast. The world moves very fast. So it's hard for large educational systems to single-handedly change as fast as the business world is asking them to change. So it is somewhat of, as businesses, our social responsibility to proactively be part of kind of helping mentor that change.
Totally agree. And being proactive requires movement from people, which brings me to my next question is employee engagement, right? It is critical for the company to live the culture of giving back. It can't just be something that's on the wall or on paper, right? So it's very important once we set up initiatives to get everybody engaged on it, facilitate that activity to the rest of the employees. I think it's important to have some kind of a volunteering program or some kind of let's get together. It's great for team building, but it's also great for having those boots on the ground where we can actually make an impact. How can companies get there? Like, how could you galvanize your workforce to kind of engage on that social mission and want to do that volunteering?
Oh my God. I think fear is one of the most strongest motivating feelings, right? So I'm not saying fear your employees into engaging. I'm saying always when you're doing these type of initiatives, I always ask myself, what's the worst case scenario? What would happen if we don't do this? And kind of attack everything that way. So for example, what are the ramifications if we don't give back? Let's just pretend we don't give back. we just let everything kind of stay on the commercial side and we don't do any philanthropic initiatives. What are the ramifications of that? Lack of engagement from our employees, maybe bad branding, right? What other things could kind of come from choosing not to embrace that social responsibility?
Stagnation. A lot of people feeling like there's no real impact. The job becomes just a job. I really believe that um, it's very important not only to create volunteering programs within the organization, to create those team events. It helps really build the culture and morale within and the team spirit. But it's also it's important to announce it and publicize it and let everybody know, because obviously one organization is not going to change the community. But by letting everybody know about it, you, number one, your employees are going to be proud of working for this company that is really making an impact, because it's all over social media, all over there, right? And then also you're inviting other companies to copy what you're doing. It will trigger a whole tsunami of questions of, what's this company doing? Why are they doing this? Why are we not doing this? So that's one. The other one is invite other companies to join your effort, right? It's when you're, as an organization, when you have an educational arm like Weekend Code, for example, and you're organizing hackathons, it's important to invite other companies to help you organize the hackathon, to help you share the joy and the reward of gratification from seeing all these young kids doing something that they love and learning from it and going through that experience. It's gratifying for both them and us. It's important to share that. And when you do share that, obviously you create that sense of wanting to do it again, but not just within your organization, but every single organization that has helped you do that particular event. So sharing is very, very important in that aspect as well.
Right. So when you begin with, hey, what are the ramifications of us not doing this, right? I think the possibilities are endless of how to implement. So if you're very clear on, hey, if we don't do this, these are the things that can happen, that's where creativity comes in. That's where open-mindedness comes in. That's where, okay, what initiatives can we do? And how can we, share that impact with others and create strategic partnerships? But it all needs to start from understanding why it's important and what would it look like if you didn't do it. And then from that, catapult into creativity, because there really is no wrong answer on how to getting it done, because the most important thing is to get started. You're not going to get the perfect initiative right away. You're not going to get the perfect strategic partner to share with right away. But yeah, for me, it's you start off by asking yourself and your executives or whoever the stakeholders are, what would happen if we don't, right? And what are the ramifications of that? And let that unlock, the stream of possibility.
Yeah, so it's important. That is important. Bringing the people on the why, and clarifying why that why is so important, and inviting them to discover the what is going to be done to move forward. Also talked about bringing other businesses, other community entities, organizations, not necessarily for profit, into whatever event or whatever drive you're organizing. We talked about the gratification, how important, how companies, when they do that, it needs to bring a moral satisfaction to the employees beyond the material, because there's usually no material ROI on this. The last point I want to touch upon is how important is it to celebrate these things? Because a lot of companies, they do it feels good at the moment, they advertise it for a little bit. Tell us the celebration part. Like, how do you celebrate it by, let's say, keeping track of graduates that came out of the reskilling program, or like how important to keep track of numbers and celebrate those numbers?
Yeah, so I think sizing is so important. So once you've identified, hey, this is what can happen if we don't do it. You've got stakeholders kind of rallying around an idea or an initiative, and then you guys start implementing these initiatives. It's so important for you to size it. So let's say, for example, this is how we're going to start. We're going to start with a hackathon, or we're going to start with a sponsorship, or we're going to start with X, right? You size it and you put an identifier of, hey, this initiative is going to be successful if X. So, for example, if it's a hackathon, if we get 100 participants, or if we get 10 sponsors, or whatever your metric is, you size it, because again, you don't want to spend 6 months and then have nothing to show for it at the end of it and nobody liked the initiative, right? So start with something relatively small. Make sure that you size it so it doesn't get out of control and out of scope. And then you attach a measurable that'll define the success of that. And then you retrospect it at the end of it, because it's so important to kind of stop and say, hey, did this work? If so, let's celebrate. Did this work? Why didn't it work? And let's celebrate what did work, right? That way it can continue to be a motivator and have a positive spin on it. So it's so important to make sure that you size it, make sure that you define measurements of success, and then that you put a stopping point for evaluation, and that you celebrate at that point, and then you pivot. Because once you've committed to the initiative, you can't just say, oh, this one didn't work and I'm walking away. Well, it didn't work. Ask yourself why it didn't work and how do you pivot. Right.
Yeah, and it's also important when you do that to make sure that all these numbers are transparent within the organization. Everybody has to see the progress as it's happening. Everybody has to be privy to the numbers, because that's the only way you're gonna get the engagement you're looking for. And when you're celebrating something, you celebrate it through not only just numbers but success stories. Like, follow through. If you have a success today, follow through a couple of years later. Where is that success? What happened to it? Try to put inspirational stories around it to galvanize the workforce to want to join the next drive you have or the next event. I think it all goes back in a circle of wanting to do it again. And that's how the tradition will persist.
I think the one thing that comes to mind is, if a tree fell in the middle of the forest and no one heard it or saw it, did it really fall, right? So whenever you're taking on any type of initiative within any organization, public or private, whether it's for social good or for change management or X, right? It's so important that you over communicate that externally, internally, depending on whatever the strategy or the tactic is for the initiative. So yeah, that is key, because again, you don't want to do all this effort, cut down the tree in the middle of the forest and have no one hear it or see it, and then it really never happened, right?